Throughout histories, economists have strived to design a mechanism for measuring the wealth of nations. In the 1930s, Colin Clark and Simon Kuznets were pioneers in creating the first national income estimates, which were used to support macroeconomic stabilization and wartime planning. Their work was so influential that they were awarded the Nobel Prize in 1971. But the first coordinated international macroeconomic guidelines emerged only in 1953 under the auspices of the United Nations, establishing a standardized accounting structure for production, income, consumption, accumulation, and wealth. This system has been revised in 1968, 1993, and 2008 to reflect the changing global economy, including the rise of services, financial innovations, globalization, and the growing importance of intangible assets. This system is known as Standard National Accounts System, or SNA, which is a comprehensive system that covers the entire economic cycle. It consists of a series of accounts that track different aspects of the economy. And these accounts are considered essential for understanding the economic health of a nation and are constantly updated to reflect changes in the global economy. Let's look at each of these accounts in brief. The first is the production account that calculates gross value added and gross domestic product, which provide a measure of the value added by each sector of the economy and overall output of the nation. The second is the income accounts that show how income that is generated by production is distributed among different institutional units and redistributed through taxes and social benefits. This provides insight into the revenue share and the role of different sectors in generating it. The third is the use of income account records, which shows how disposable income is divided between final consumption and saving. And this is important for understanding consumer behavior and the overall level of the savings in the economy. Fourth is the accumulation accounts that track changes in assets, liabilities, and net worth, including capital formation and financial transactions. This provides a measure of the nation's wealth and how it is changing over time. And finally, the balance sheets that provide a snapshot of the stock of assets and liabilities held by institutional units at the beginning and the end of the account period. And this is crucial for understanding the overall financial position of the nation and its ability to withstand economic shocks. Don't worry, we will not be shifting the focus of this video to discuss traditional economics, but I would like to discuss some indicators that were derived from the SNA and still recognized internationally to evaluate the national wealth and to judge how wealthy the economy of each country is. This brief will help us better understand the following videos, so here we go. The first indicator is the gross domestic product, or GDP, which is perhaps the most well-known indicator. We often hear about it from various sources, and there is a general consensus that it reflects the level of economic activity. In reality, it measures the total value of all final goods and services produced within countries' borders. during a given period. And this is how GDP formula looks like. C represents the total household spending on durable and non-durable goods and services. I represents net spending on fixed assets such as machinery and buildings, new residential housing, and inventory changes to ensure that goods produced but not yet sold are counted in the period they were manufactured rather than when they were sold. G represents government expenditure on salaries, infrastructure, and public services. X minus M represents the value of the total exports minus total imports. The next indicator is the net domestic product, NDP, which is the GDP after subtracting depreciation. And the equation looks like this. And depreciation represents the wear and tear of machinery, buildings, vehicles, and other fixed assets. And in this sense, NDP gives a better insight about sustainable production because it accounts for the capital used up in the process. The third indicator is the gross national product, GNP, which measures the total income earned by a country's residents, regardless of where they are located. And in this sense, each country is interested in supporting its residents to expand their business globally, as long as they pay taxes within the original country's geography. In other words, this indicator measures the spatial dimension of economic activity. And this is the formula of GNP. Net factor income from abroad, or NFIA, is calculated by subtracting the income earned by foreign residents within the country from the income earned by the country's residents and businesses abroad. These earnings of the residents abroad are added to the GNP, so the formula for NFIA is as follows. And the last indicator that I wanted to discuss is the net national product, or NNP, which adjusts GNP by subtracting depreciation. And of course, the formula of NNP looks like this. There are numerous nuances associated with these indicators, as well as many other indicators that are derived from them. But again, our video is not about the system of national accounts itself. Instead, I want to highlight the misconception that these indicators accurately reflect the level of well-being and address both sustainable dimensions that we discussed in the previous video. It has been pointed by the majority of the scientific community that these indicators can actually give a misleading impression of the state of sustainable development. Despite this, politicians and economists often place disproportionate importance on these indicators and act as if maximizing them is the primary objective of public policy. I may surprise you, but maximizing these indicators most of the time conflict with sustainable development goals, such as promoting social equality or promoting the protection of the environment. If we examine how these indicators address the intergenerational dimension that we discussed in the previous video, we find them short-term oriented and do not consider the long-term consequences of our current economic policies. But what does that mean? Simply put, these indicators are designed to measure a period of 12 months and compare it with previous periods of similar lengths. They are not designed to take into account the long-term perspectives. From a spatial perspective, they do not consider the impact on others and instead focus solely on maximizing the indicators for the country where the national product is calculated. You know what? Let us dive deeper in the obvious shortcomings that are caused by relying on the traditional economic indicators to measure the quality of life and welfare. First, they fail to account for the environmental degradation and resources depletion. For example, if a country cuts down its forests, depletes its soil fertility, and pollutes the water supplies, this surely will make the country poorer in a very real sense. However, national income accounts only record the market value of the timber, the agricultural products, and the industrial output of the resources as positive contribution to the GDP. This traditional economic approach encourages the depletion of all resources and assets provided by the ecosystem in order to improve the indicators. The simple fact that this will ultimately lead to the depletion of all resources in the long term and cut all these income statements is never considered. Second, economic growth is guaranteed according to these indicators when the government spends more. However, this expenditure may not necessarily lead to true improvement of human well-being. In fact, it even may increase the inequality and environmental degradation. Third, defensive expenditures are dealt with in an unbalanced manner. And by the way, defensive expenditures refer to the money spent to avoid negative impacts such as crime, fire, floods, pollution, and similar. If police expenditures are increased to counter the rise in crime levels, the increased spending raises GDP. However, no consideration is made for the negative impact of higher crime rates, which can have adverse effects on the economic, human, and social capitals. Fourth, volunteer work is not accounted for, as these indicators do not count the benefits of unpaid volunteer work that highly contributes to the social well-being. But the same activities are included if they were paid for. Fifth, household production is not included. Activities such as housekeeping and gardening, which are not paid for, are not accounted for in the GDP. This means that much social capital potential is not reflected in the GDP, even though it contributes to the real well-being of the society. Sixth, no consideration is made for changes in leisure. For example, a country's GDP may rise if total work hours increase, but no accounting is made for the loss of leisure time. Seventh, GDP does not value the health of country's citizens, their education level, participation, inclusion, or other social and political factors that also improve the well-being. In a nutshell, not only that sustainable development concept that is declared by many politicians and governments may not be even close to the one that was intended by design, but also the traditional economic theory that and the derived indicators from it never allows us to evaluate the state of sustainable development or the well-being of the society. Speeches and lectures that address sustainable development should not be accompanied by videos that only focus on solar, wind energy, plastic recycling, but also videos demonstrating healthy nation living a convenient lifestyle with equal access to energy, electricity, and communication technology while preserving biodiversity, because that is the real sustainable development deliverable by design. Traditional statistics that only measure how much wealthier became the wealthy through the exploitation of all types of capital should be replaced with the ones that reflects the goal of sustainable development. In this video, we recognized that one of the biggest challenges facing sustainable development initiatives is the use of the inadequate economic indicator system, which conflict with the core understanding of sustainability. This needs to change before any sustainable initiative can be successful. And in the same time, it must be clear to you now why single country cannot pursue sustainable development in such a current economic climate. Because simply it risks losing the competitive position and becoming less attractive for both economic and human capitals. And the only solution is to alter old economic theory and models, then make them global to give all nations equal chances to reach sustainable development goals. But what specific changes do we need? How can they be implemented? And most importantly, how can we ensure that these changes support both economic growth and ecosystem diversity? Well, that is exactly what we are going to discuss in the next videos. So stay with us when we explore the answers to these questions.